I hear you guys saying, and I'm not from Hampshire, so maybe, so queer, whatever that means. But what I hear you guys saying is feminist theory more. That you're looking at nature and everything else in a feminist theory perspective rather than a queer theory perspective. So yeah, tell us
For
more.
sure, and I mean, and that's there's a lot of feminist theory, queer theory, and such.
I would argue that there is a lot of kind of queer. I mean, maybe I'm kind of assuming too much about what you're arguing, but it sounds like what you're kind of arguing is that there's this white kind of relationship or westernized relationship with nature that is a conqueror and conquered, versus other maybe non-Western cultures are living in a more symbiotic relationship, which often is considered a more queer relationship because there's not that power. What? And not romantic, right? It's. I think that, I mean, queer identities obviously span a large, range of experiences, but one of the kind of more marked aspects of queer identity is that kind of more level playing field. And I mean, you see like same, starts with like gay and like lesbian kind of identities and obviously moves out, but there is kind of, and whatever, but I should get into that, but it seems like there's kind of, it's not so much that like heterosexual like dominating of the male over the female heteronormative structure.
For sure.
Is that kind of?
I mean, I'm talking about like gender in part, which is like the feminist theory aspect, where we're talking about like relationships between male-bodied people and female-bodied people specifically. But I'm also talking about the sexuality of how humanity's sexuality is conceptualized as an aggregate, and how nature's sexuality is conceptualized. Does that make sense?
What's an aggregate?
On a macro scale,
okay.
At a large level. Like humans are aggregated in this conception, in John Muir's idea, as just men. When we talk about like humanity, it's man in there, or like when we one great step for man, and so I'm sorry, I'm trying not to get ahead of myself. I feel like I am advancing like a theory that is still somewhat in the works, because I feel like this is a very new interrelationship between environmental justice theory and queer theory. And so if anything doesn't make sense, please ask questions, and like I feel like we're getting like some interesting discussion going on. And that's, I'm trying to like advance these ideas, and then we can talk more or discuss more like what they mean and how they play out. I was going to use like the empirical case of empirical like the historical case of when the national parks were created, hunters were sent in to kill all the large animals, and so only when these natural parks were made tame and safe for capitalist consumption, were they actually parks? Were they actually like usable or acceptable in terms of capitalism, in terms of heterosexuality? They were no longer a deviant space. Everything that was wild about the national parks was killed, was like straight up murdered and conquered, it was literally like it was given a facelift. It was made acceptable in less obvious ways, and so I wanted to talk about what that means for how we conceptualize urban environments, where we talk about urban spaces. Can we conceive them? Can conceive of them as having environments, you know, and what does environment mean outside of this context of heterosexuality, of masculinity, where the environment's just to be conquered, or outside of necessarily a scientific perspective, like how do people's communities, or how do communities, and how do people, and how do cultures conceptualize an environment? So maybe we could get some answers. Like what do people think? Like how do you see, you know, what is your environment?
Where you learn from.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
I guess just what surrounds you, both physically and emotionally.
For sure.
What nurtures you, not only in terms of like food, but you know, like the air that you're breathing and like what you're taking in from the outside.
Absolutely. And like, I'm gonna drink this bottle of water.
So there's less plastic in that.
Here's the environment. Right, so, you know, nature is green. And so I do want to, for sure. I do want to talk about what it means for communities in urban environments, or urban areas, to have a relationship to their environment, and how it's important that when environments are conceptualized as queer, they are, which is to be tamed, which is to be made acceptable for capitalist consumption. They are slated for urban renewal, for gentrification, and for what's that great word? I'm totally forgetting this word. Whatever, urban renewal and gentrification. And I want to use the circumstances of this organization in New York City called Fierce. Have you all heard of them? That stands for fabulous, independent, educated radicals advocating for, no, there's not advocating. I'm totally forgetting this. My apologies.
I think it says in the book.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. You should grab that.
Fabulous.
Go ahead.
Educated radicals for community empowerment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so they're dealing with the circumstances of the last 2 decades or so of gentrification of this space that they conceive as their environment, which is the Christopher Street Pier. And the Christopher Street Pier has been for now almost a century understood as a gay and then a queer space. It first emerged as a gay space in the 1910s, when after it stopped really being like a commercially used pier. All of the former steel workers would go down to the pier, and it was almost all men, and they would all have sex with each other, and that it became like known as just this space for gay sex. And after several generations of this, there started to appear bars, and in general, it was just a space that was understood to be a non-heterosexual space through or non-heterosexual environment through its use and the claim that was laid to it by queer people. And by the 70s and the 80s, after Stonewall, which was the Stonewall riots, we're all familiar with those, right? That's where, cool. Which was on Christopher Street, I believe. There were so many more spaces that were opened, laying claim to Christopher Street in general, the proper part of Christopher Street proper, as well as the pier, as being really important to queer identity in New York City.